Hello, everyone. Very good morning to all of you on this Saturday morning, a day before Independence Day. First of all, let me welcome you and let me wish you 75th India's Independence Day. On this special event, we thought of getting Saurabh Mukherjee and Team Marcellus to talk about India's Kings of Capital for aspiring investors who intend to build wealth over next 10 years, because we have been running this series of webinars named Crystal Gazing Next Decade of Wealth Creation for investors in India. And there would have been nobody better than Saurabh to talk about this, because particularly we have seen that currently we are at maybe all-time high levels of equity markets. Markets have run up more than anybody could have imagined over last 1.5 years, after an event which was kind of a very unusual event and nobody could actually comprehend that event. And despite that lot of economy sectors have actually moved and participated, but financial services sector, which is actually the highest weight sector in larger indices like Nifty and Sensex, and if I were to talk to any fund manager, the top notch sector that anybody would recommend is financial services, and I believe in that as well. But this sector, fortunately or unfortunately, is yet to participate and has yet not shown the kind of potential which it carries in a full running economy. And that is why I say maybe this is a fortunate fact, because it still throws an area of opportunity for investors to make a lot of money. And because we know Saurabh Mukherjee and his team Marcellus has actually taught all of us a very clean and a very robust process of investing into businesses with confidence. And that is where they had launched this portfolio Kings of Capital. And that is why I thought that let's do a detailed discussion and webinar on this topic on this Saturday. Over to you guys. Over to you, Pramod, Saurabh, and Tej. Welcome to you. And the entire platform is available for you to discuss and give your perspective. Looking forward.
Thank you. Thanks, Kamal. And hello, everyone. Glad to be talking with you guys on this Saturday morning. Appreciate the opportunity, Kamal and team. So as the topic goes, this is about our newest strategy, Kings of Capital, which focuses on the financial services sector. Just to remind the audience that we simply have one investment philosophy, as Saurabh might have reiterated on multiple platforms. We look to invest in companies whose promoters are clean, whose capital allocation is sensible, and who have high barriers to entry. So this product is no different. The investment philosophy is common across our flagship product, consistent compounders, the small cap product, the little champs, and this youngest product, Kings of Capital. It's just the opportunity set that we consider for each of these products are different. As you know, consistent compounders is largely a large and mid cap product, whereas Little Champs is a pure small cap product, and Kings of Capital focuses on the 100 largest financial services companies in the country, right from banks, NBFCs, life insurance, general insurance, brokers, wealth managers, asset managers, so on and so forth, including potentially fintech companies as and when they get listed. It is just about a year old, so it is an opportune time to look at what we have done so far. It is broadly based on what Saurabh will elaborate in terms of a structural theme of financialization of savings in this country. As Kamal would vouch for, and as many of you would have experienced yourself, the country as a whole, the households in this country have sort of moving away from their historic love for real estate and gold and starting to invest or put their savings into financial assets, which is literally begun less than a decade ago, and likely is going to continue for the next couple of decades, which provides this unique opportunity for all of us to benefit from. So whilst a lot of people might scoff at investing in a sector-specific strategy, given that it's akin to putting all your eggs in one basket, it defies diversification in some ways. But this sort of a powerful structural trend allows us to overcome that lack of diversification and still be able to deliver healthy risk-adjusted returns, as Tej will show you. So with that opportunity, I'll just give you a brief introduction of Tej as well. So Tej is the fund manager of Kings of Capital. He's been with us right from the outset. In fact, we had the pleasure of working with him at our previous outfit at Ambit as well. Tej is a chartered accountant, has and has cleared all his levels of the CFA exam. He used to work in a Silicon Valley headquartered VC fund called Mayfield, which manages more than $3 billion globally. And then at Marcellus, he began covering the financial services sector for us. So all the stocks that you see in our consistent compounders and Little Champs portfolio, which are from the financial services sector, are thanks to Tej's research. And now he manages the Kings of Capital portfolio as well. So to set the context for Kings of Capital, I'll hand it over to Saurabh. Over to you, Saurabh.
Thanks, Pramod. And before Tej takes over, let me also thank Kamal for hosting us on, I think, very appropriate day. I think India's 75 years of independence is tomorrow, but I think as many of you know, there's 74 of you have logged in. But as many of you know, that millions of Indians haven't gained financial independence. The country might have gained independence 75 years ago, but most people in your and my social circle, most people that Tej, Pramod, Kamal and I would know, they're locked in the tyranny of poor investing, real estate, fixed deposits, low quality products which simply don't beat the rate of inflation. And I think therefore I thought it was very, very appropriate that we're hosting, Kamal is hosting us a day before Independence Day. There's three reasons why we launched Kings of Capital just as the COVID outbreak was hitting the Indian economy hard. I'll quickly summarize those and then Tej will take you through the investment philosophy. There's already several of you asking questions on forensic accounting. Tej will cover how we do forensic accounting on naughty lenders. And by the way, our book our book Diamonds in the Dust, the 2 chapters on forensic accounting will be published on Monday. So Monday, another type of independence from rogue companies who wake up in the morning to loot your and my money. So Diamonds in the Dust Kindle version out on Monday and the hardback out on 23rd. Please make sure you buy that. It's not, it won't cost you much. It'll show you how prominent companies loot billions of dollars of your and my money in broad daylight. In the chapter on financials, Tej has laid out how prominent lenders who are household names looted billions of dollars, hard-earned money from Indian households. But leaving aside forensic accounting, which Tej will cover, there are 3 reasons why last July 2020, we launched Kings of Capital. We're very happy with it. There's 550 crores invested in it, 800 happy clients. I was client number 1. I'm delighted with the returns Tej has generated for us. The 3 reasons for launching this product were A, public sector banks account for 60% of the Indian economy's loan book. As most of you know, in the last 20-25 years, none of the public sector banks have generated a return on equity above the cost of equity. The way these banks survive is you and I work hard, we pay income taxes to the government of India. The government takes that money and drops it into the PSU bank's balance sheet. And that's how they compete with efficient, high quality private sector banks. It became evident to us once COVID hammered the Indian exchequer's finances. It became evident that this cannot be sustained. The government simply doesn't have the money to bail out these banks. The government needs easily $20-25 billion to rebuild the PSU banks' balance sheets. Paisa nahi hai. And therefore, we said over the next 10 years, there'll be a structural shift in market share from the dominant PSU banks, right? State Bank of India, Bank of Baroda, Punjab National Bank, Allahabad Bank, you can go on and on, right? 60% market share. Even if 10 percentage points shifts in the next decade, you and I will make a solid compounding on well-run private sector banks. That was reason number 1. Second reason was what we've seen for a long time, and Tej will give you more color. Something like 80% of India's 10,000 NBFCs have sort of rogue financials, made up numbers, right? And that sort of the NBFC construct, which is incredibly fragmented, 10,000 NBFCs, 100 large NBFCs, that fragmented NBFC universe basically has survived by 3 types of naughtiness. They do naughty accounting, the auditor obviously complicit in that. Then they do naughty things with the credit rating agencies, and then they do naughty things in the money market with the mutual funds. What we could see last summer, what we saw was there's 3 types of attack on this dirty construct. Firstly, the government had created an audit regulator based in Delhi, which was turning the screws on the audit community, putting the fear of God into them. Secondly, SEBI had come down hard on the credit rating agencies after the IL&FS fiasco. I think barring CRISIL, the rest of the credit rating agencies, CEOs were basically told to take a hike. And thirdly, SEBI had told the mutual funds, passed an order saying the mutual funds cannot invest, debt mutual funds can't invest more than a quarter of their corpus in in NBFC paper. Full disclosure, I sit on that relevant SEBI committee. Now, the result of these three actions was fund flow to naughty NBFCs dried up. By last year, fund flow to naughty NBFCs dried up, and we realized that market share consolidation in the NBFC sector will be epic. And Kings of Capital, Tej took a position in 3 high-quality, top-quality NBFCs with clean numbers, rational capital allocation, and dominant market positions. So, driver 1, PSU banks ka demise, good quality private lenders ka rise. Driver 2, naughty NBFCs ka demise, high quality NBFCs ka rise. And third driver, what all of us are doing here, right? The third aspect of financial services in our country is 95% of Indian household wealth. The RBI says 95% of Indian household wealth is locked up in physical assets, real estate and gold primarily. Right? And as all of you know, if you invest in physical assets, you're not going to beat the rate of inflation. It doesn't matter which real estate you bought, in which city in the country, or kab liya hai, aur aapko kitna compounding lag raha hai. The data is very, very clear. Real estate and gold struggle to beat the rate of inflation. Real wealth create nahi hota. The RBI has said that's where India's wealth really is locked up. The RBI further says repeatedly that no country in the world has this sort of skew. 95% in physical assets, kisi aur desh mein nahi hai. Right? So 5% in financial assets, right? India's household wealth, right? Wealth of people like you and me added up for the whole country, roughly $10 trillion. India's household wealth, roughly 10 trillion. That means only $500 billion of India's household wealth is in financial assets. Now, as you know, right? Even Jeff Bezos alone or Elon Musk alone has more than that in financial assets, right? It's crazy what we have done in our country. So what we can see, the data from AMFI, SEBI, IRDA is showing is this number, 5% is growing at 1% a year. As exigencies like COVID, demon, GST make people realize that was owning flats or gold, na to liquidity milti hai, na to capital appreciation milta hai, na to cash flow milta hai. People are switching, right? Families like yours and mine are switching. That's why on Sunday morning, 91 of you are listening to us. And this switch is very powerful. 1% of assets, 1% of household assets shifting every year means $100 billion a year is shifting from physical to financial. And we believe we can make a lot of money from that. As financial assets grow, what's really happening is life insurance. People are buying life insurance to make sure that once they are gone, their next of kin is looked after. People are buying health insurance. COVID ho jaye, 15-20 lakh ka jo dhakka hai, the health insurer will pick it up. I won't pick it up. People are buying mutual funds. And people are obviously coming to firms like us via wealth managers and broking agencies. So the third aspect of Kings of Capital, which we felt was beautifully teed up, right? And it's that construct has borne us perfectly. The third aspect of Kings of Capital was savings. Financial savings is a theme. If we invest in it, if you and I buy stakes in insurers, asset managers, we can make super returns over the next decade. That is the third leg. So Tej will take you through these 3 legs: banks, NBFCs, and plays on savings. The consolidation of that is Kings of Capital. It's a super product. I am a happy investor, and I hope by the end of this session, you too will be persuaded to look at this product. So Tej, over to you.
Thanks, Saurabh. So if we were to look at how we started and how we thought about this product, Kings of Capital. So the past 6-7 years especially have been challenging for the financial services sector. And we've seen that as a sector, year after year, we saw some or the other macroeconomic event play out. Now, whether it be COVID over the past year, or whether it be the IL&FS crisis, demonetization, introduction of GST, or the asset quality review in 2014, 2015. Each of these challenges resulted in an increase in NPAs for the sector as a whole, and especially for the weaker banks and NBFCs within the sector. So what started out as, say, 6-7 years ago, a 3-4% sort of NPA level at a sectoral level, that even before COVID had reached about 10-11%. So we had seen a 2 to 3x sort of increase in the NPAs for the sector as a whole. On top of that, last year we saw that COVID happened. So that put even more pressure on the financial services players within the industry. Not only lenders, not only banks and NBFCs, but we even saw a famous mutual fund come under pressure. So that was a scenario when we thought that this would be the right time to invest in the highest quality financial companies, whether it be lenders or non-lenders, because these were the companies which were well positioned to gain market share in an adverse situation, in an adverse macroeconomic environment like that. This is something which we had seen historically as well. So if we were to look at any of the previous financial crises, what we had seen was that there was a lot of panic, which we see during a financial crisis, whether it be 2008-9 or whether it be the crisis of the late 90s, early 2000s, when about 80% of India's NBFCs got wiped off. We'd seen that the newspaper headlines were pretty similar. There was widespread panic. However, if you were to invest in a financial services product or even in the bank Nifty at a time like this, we saw that over a 3-year to 5-year period.
Just to be clear, your slides, I can't see them. Kamal, can Tej's slides be seen by everybody else?
No, I can't see. So
Okay.
you have to start the presentation.
Okay.
I can.
That's perfect. We can see them now. Yes, we can see them.
Yeah, I can see them now. Perfect.
Okay. So what we had seen was that even during the previous financial crises, whether it be 2008-9 or the crisis of the late 90s, early 2000s, if someone were to simply invest in the index itself, whenever there was a financial crisis, the returns, even for the index, even for the bank Nifty, were pretty healthy over a 3 to 5 year period. So while there was widespread panic during a crisis, the returns for the index, not only in absolute terms, were 20 to 25%, but also in relative terms versus the Nifty, which is the broader index, were pretty healthy. And the reason behind this is that the reason to invest in high quality financial companies during a crisis like this is there are 3 clear benefits that a high quality bank or an NBFC gets when you invest in them during a crisis. One is that they are able to accelerate market share gains post a crisis. Second is you obviously get the benefit of investing at a time when there is widespread panic and when there is a lot of uncertainty around the financial services sector. And third is you can also see that there is an increase in net interest margins over a period of time as competitive intensity reduces and your asset quality improves over a period of time. So if you were to look at the tables on the bottom of the screen, whether it be HDFC Limited during the crisis of the late 90s or even HDFC Bank during the global financial crisis, if we were to look at the crisis years, which are the numbers which are in bold over here. So if you were to take HDFC Limited first, FY 98-99, we saw that NPAs doubled from the pre-crisis levels. So NPAs increased from 0.5% to 1%. Along with that, the PE ratio halved from about 20 times to 8-9 times during the crisis. However, what's interesting to note is what happens after the crisis. Post the crisis, we saw HDFC Limited return to 25-30% sort of growth. This was growth which was actually higher than pre-crisis levels. Secondly, the ROE reached the highest levels that HDFC Limited had seen in its history, which are 24-25% plus sort of ROEs. Along with that, over a period of time, as normalcy returned, we also saw that PE ratio also started normalizing. Similarly, HDFC Bank during the 2008-9 global financial crisis, even HDFC Bank saw an increase in NPAs from about 1.5% to 2%. And along with that, it also saw its PE ratio contract from 29-30 times to about 18 times. So during a crisis, there is a double impact on the stock price of financial companies. One is asset quality is under pressure. Second is the PE ratio also contracts. As a result of that, there is pressure on the share price. However, over the next 3 to 4 years, we've seen high quality financial companies accelerate loan book growth to either back to pre-COVID levels or higher than pre-COVID levels. And secondly, asset quality also gradually improves. Like we're seeing in the case of HDFC Bank, actually asset quality was better than pre-crisis levels over the next 4-5 years. Along with that, as we see that the financials improve, uncertainty reduces post a crisis, we also see that PE ratios start normalizing. As a result of that, investors benefit, like I said, because P ratios normalize. You also see that growth is back to pre-crisis levels. Asset quality is equal to or better than pre-crisis levels. Now, the reason that these high quality financials are able to gain market share is most other players in the sector, even before the crisis, have not been as conservative as these high quality companies. Therefore, they see a higher increase in NPAs, of even higher deterioration of asset quality. And as they are struggling with NPA issues, they're also struggling to raise liquidity. They're also struggling to raise deposits because there is a simply put flight to safety to high quality financials, whether it be from depositors, which is something we saw last year when Yes Bank was under pressure, or whether it be in the NBFC crisis, where banks simply move towards high quality NBFCs when they want to lend money. Most of these banks, say HDFC or Kotak Bank, were able to raise deposits pretty easily over the past year or so, simply because depositors felt that these are safer banks to put money in. Even on the NBFC side, we saw Bajaj Finance raise money at 5 to 6%, while most other NBFCs during the first quarter, especially of last year, were struggling to raise money or were raising money at much higher rates. Because of this, we see that most other low quality banks and NBFCs recede from the market, while a high quality lender is able to keep on growing market share and is able to pick and choose the borrowers of their quality post a crisis for the next 3 to 4 years. Now, coming to the way we've done stock selection. So we went through what the bigger picture is. We went through the market share story, how high quality lenders benefit over the next 3-4 years after a crisis. So that is the background for the fund. However, it is important for us to stick to the investment philosophy of picking lenders, picking banks, picking NBFCs, which have high quality accounting and which have also historically demonstrated good capital allocation. So our universe, because this is a financial services focused fund, consists of banks, NBFCs, insurers, brokers, asset managers, and this is about say 95 to 100 stocks in the listed universe. We ran these companies through our forensic filters, and we'll spend say 5 minutes on these forensic filters in the coming slides. And this is what resulted into the elimination of about a third of the universe. So about 30 companies get eliminated by using our forensic screens. Then on the remaining 65 stocks, we ran our capital allocation filters. So once we know that these are companies which are doing accounting the right way, and there is no issue on accounting at least, then we run them through this capital allocation filter, which tells us that whether over the past 6-7 years, these companies have consistently generated, in simple terms, return on equity above cost of equity. Now, again, this filter, about 35-40 companies get eliminated, and we are finally left with a short list of about 20 to 25 stocks. Now, this is where on these 20 to 25 stocks, we try and spend most of our time. As a part of our research, we try and analyze whether these companies have barriers to entry, whether these companies have a real competitive advantage or not, so that they can sustain the differential between cost of equity and return of equity even in the future. So these are the 25 companies which have, over the past 6-7 years, allocated capital prudently, have done accounting the right way. We try and analyze whether they can continue this in the foreseeable future. Basis our research, the way we try and do this is we do channel checks, we do a lot of primary data work. We go through the annual reports of these companies for the past 10 to 15 years. We speak to competitors. For example, in the case of say banks and NBFCs, we go and speak to collection managers, branch officers, DSAs, etc. In the case of say insurers, you would speak to agents, brokers, actuaries, underwriters, etc. And basis this, we've created a 12-stock portfolio, and this is going to be a 10 to 14 stock portfolio of financial companies. Out of the 12 stocks, 8 of them are from the lending universe, 4 of them are from the non-lending universe. with a median market cap of about $9 to $10 billion. Now coming to our forensic screens, so the way it works is that these screens are created for banks and NBFCs, and there are 11 ratios which are specifically designed for financial companies, which we use to weed out companies with naughty accounting. The 11 ratios compare each of these banks and NBFCs against each other. So in that way, it is a relative scoring rather than an absolute number. So to take an example, say some of the ratios we use are fee income as a percentage of net interest income, volatility in net interest income, the volatility in NPA, contingent liabilities as a percentage of net worth. So these are the 4 or 5 ratios out of the 11 ratios that we use. Now to take an example, say fee income as a percentage of net interest income, it is pretty easy for a lender, especially for a wholesale lender, to give out money and charge a hefty upfront fee income. Now, what that does is it also results in adverse selection. Say in the case of Yes Bank, if there were to be a borrower who would be willing to pay 3, 4, 5% upfront, then that sort of borrower would automatically be a borrower who would be under some sort of stress. If you were to be a high quality corporate, you would not be willing to pay up so much money upfront as fee income. The best maybe that you'd pay up is maybe 0.5%. Secondly, what that does for Yes Bank from the bank's perspective is that you are able to increase your loan book. You're able to book a hefty upfront fee income. So you're also able to pump up your profitability for that particular time period. And the asset quality hit for that may come, say, 2-3 years down the line. And that is when we saw that, say, the fee income as a percentage of net interest income for Yes Bank was almost twice as high that of Kotak. These are some of the red flags which flash up using our forensic filter. Similarly, contingent liability as a percentage of net worth for Yes Bank was 23 times versus only, say, 4 times for a Kotak Bank. And these red flags, when combined across all of these 10, 11 accounting ratios, finally give us a score for the lender. Now that score can be between a D1 to a D10. D1 stands for decile 1. And if a company is amongst the lowest deciles, which is D8 to D10, then we believe that that is a company which is not doing accounting the right way. These are companies that we simply avoid. And when we look at the correlation between accounting quality and share price returns, we find a very strong correlation. So for example, if you were to look at the charts at the bottom of the screen, companies in the D1 to D3 deciles, companies with the highest quality accounting, are the only companies which have generated positive returns over the past 4-5 years. Versus companies in the lowest quality deciles, which we call zone of thuggery, D8 to D10, they have delivered minus 25 to minus 28% sort of CAGR returns over the past 4 years. And when we accumulate these returns over a period of time on a CAGR basis, we see that there is massive alpha which can be generated by simply investing in companies which do accounting the right way. So CY 16 to 19, for example, CAGR returns for companies in the zone of quality was around 10% versus minus 25% for companies in the bottom 3 deciles. And to take a case study of, say, DHFL, if we were to take only 3 ratios, say fee income is a percentage of net interest income, DHFL rated the second worst amongst its peers on this ratio. And again, this is like I took the example of Yes Bank, where you can manipulate your P&L and your loan book as well while booking a high upfront fee income. Similarly, on treasury income also, DHFL ranked the 3rd worst amongst its peers. When again, you can book a lot of treasury income because it is in the hand of the management when to book treasury income, when to reclassify something from available for sale to held to maturity. And again, you can book a lot of treasury income and increase your profitability and return on equity numbers. Change in reserves divided by profitability, usually for most companies, this number should be around 100%, because whatever is your profitability minus the dividend that you pay out should go to reserves. However, there were exceptional items which DHFL used to route through the reserves and surplus. There was interest expense which DHFL used to route through the reserves and surplus or the securities premium. Because of the interest expense being routed through the balance sheet rather than the P&L, you could see a inflated P&L number, higher return on equity than what was the case actually. And using these ratios, DHFL used to be as a D10, which is the lowest score on our forensic screen for the past 4-5 years. Now, coming to the overall construct of the portfolio, it consists of lenders and non-lenders, as Saurabh said in the beginning, because of the reasons he mentioned. And it consists of currently 8 lenders, 4 non-lenders. The reason that we've done this is the lenders, while they are a leverage business model, provide higher growth. Most lenders in our portfolio are around the 20% or above the 20% mark in terms of growth. While the life insurers, general insurers, the non-lending place, while they are not growing at, say, more than 20% consistently, they're growing at somewhere around the 18-19% mark. They provide a lot of stability to the portfolio because, first of all, they are non-leverage business models. Secondly, they do not take a lot of balance sheet risk. Even if we were to take COVID as an example, general insurance, during COVID, the awareness for these products increased. They did not see, even as a stock price, did not see that sort of a drawdown, the sort of drawdown that most of the lenders saw. Secondly, because general insurance, most of it is motor insurance, they actually benefited because of COVID, as motor claims came down because people were not moving around. Similarly, life insurance also did not see the sort of drawdown that most of the lenders saw, because these are businesses which are not leveraged 7 times, 8 times, 9 times. And that is as a combination, providing on one hand stability, lower volatility, and on the other hand, growth between 20 to 25%. Now, coming to the current COVID crisis and the way the lenders in our portfolio are performing, if we were to look at the NPAs for the lenders in our portfolio, they've increased from about 1.8% before COVID to 2.5%. While the worst was feared during COVID, it was feared that the NPAs might increase 2x or 3x. The NPAs are only at 2.5% versus 1.8% before COVID. And more importantly, along with that, the provision coverage ratios have improved dramatically. They've improved from about 50% to 80%. So there has been a stark improvement in provision coverage ratios. What that indicates is the balance sheets of these lenders have become extremely strong. Combining these two numbers, NPA and provision coverage ratio, actually the stress on the balance sheet, which is measured by the net NPA ratio, has not increased much for most of these lenders. The net NPA ratios are almost back to pre-COVID levels. And by the end of this financial year, or maybe even by December 20, they'll maybe be lower than pre-COVID levels for all of these lenders. So they've coped up with the COVID crisis extremely well. That over a period of 15 months or 12 months, they've been able to create enough provisions to cover for all of that has happened, the lockdowns that have happened over the past year or so. And despite all of this, despite creating these provisions, the tier 1 and the capital adequacy ratio for these lenders has actually improved and is higher than pre-COVID levels. So tier 1 before COVID used to be around 18%. This number has increased now to 21%. And this is a factor of two things. One is that during the past year, these lenders have become a bit more conservative for the first 2 quarters because it was the country was under lockdown. They were not able to lend, so lending has slowed down. Secondly, their pre-provisioning profitability and their operating profitability has been extremely strong. So they have been able to remain profitable during the crisis, and they've been able to create these excess provisions out of their profitability itself. So the balance sheets of these lenders remain extremely strong, and this is where most of the firepower for market share gains over the next few years will come from for these lenders. Finally, coming to performance, we launched on 28th July last year Since then, the portfolio has returned 32% versus about 56% for the Bank Nifty. And if you look at the differential largely, it is coming from two factors. One is the Bank Nifty largely consists of 5 banks, which make up 90% of Bank Nifty, which is ICICI Bank, SBI, Axis, HDFC, and Kotak. Out of these banks, we don't have ICICI, SBI. And because the Bank Nifty consists of 5 banks versus in our portfolio, we have non-lenders which make up around 30% of the portfolio. We also have NBFCs in the portfolio. There is a differential. So, for example, the non-lenders, HDFC Life, ICICI Lombard, these were already trading at almost all-time highs when we created the portfolio. So there is a large base effect over here versus say SBI, ICICI, Axis. They had seen a 50 to 60% correction. And when say 100 rupees goes down to 50 rupees and it comes back to 100 rupees, it looks like a 100% return. Versus say a HDFC or a Kotak Bank, they had seen a 25 to 30% sort of a drawdown. And when they recover, it looks like a 30 to 40% sort of a return. So base effect is one, composition of the portfolio is second. And large part of this 56%, say to take up specific names, SBI has given 160, 170% sort of return, makes up 15% of the Bank Nifty. So about 30 to 40% of this 56% is constituted by SBI itself. And now we've seen the history of these PSU lenders. There can be time periods when the price to book multiple re-rates, or there can be a time period of strong macroeconomic environment like we see now, and SBI can perform then. But over a long period of time, the return on equity for SBI has not exceeded cost of equity. And therefore, we remain focused on lenders which have consistently generated high ROEs, which have consistently generated growth. And over a period of time, give us 20 to 25% of absolute returns. So yeah, I'll stop over here.
So just to quickly pick up on that point on performance. So I think on today on 14th August, it's actually 35% up from inception. And as I said, I'm investor number 1. The reason I've kept topping up my investment in Kings of Capital beyond the initial investment I made in July last year, the reason I've kept topping up is the signs of an economic recovery are actually quite widespread now. To be honest, it's not even signs of an economic recovery unless somebody's out of their mind. The economic recovery is very tangible. You can see electricity demand at all-time highs. You can see GST collections at all-time highs. I'm sure you know about the news about global shortages of shipping containers, global shortages of semiconductors. The Indian IT services industry, one of our largest exporter, is facing a talent crunch like never before. Prominent listed companies are reporting each of them needs lakhs of programmers. So one of India's most influential industries going through an unprecedented boom. The current boom in IT services way outsurpasses what took place at the turn of the century during the Y2K period. I'm sure all of you are hearing about the IPOs from the tech sector, funding into the tech sector roaring in, and more generally, the consolidation of India, right? The consolidation of this mighty country into the hands of 20 companies is underway. That's how every country in the world has evolved. Every country in the world grows by the entire economy crunching into the hands of 15, 20 powerful companies, and that process is underway. As you would have heard us say, that's how we invest in CCP. CCP benefits from the crunching of the whole country into the hands of 20 powerful, dominant franchises. What Kings of Capital is doing, and this is the reason I keep topping up, is the largest sector in the economy is financial services, a quarter of our GDP, nearly 40% of our stock market. Within financial services, massive consolidation underway, right? Massive consolidation underway. Easiest way to see it, every quarter, HDFC Bank, Kotak Bank, Bajaj Finance report loan growth roughly in the 20% region. And every quarter, the RBI reports, and this has been going on for a long time. Every quarter, RBI says credit offtake in the country is anywhere between 5 to 10%. These lenders and Kings of Capital report their credit growth is 20%. So what's happening? The largest sector in the economy is crunching up into the hands of a dozen or so high quality lenders, of which 8 are in our portfolio, right? So that's the first and obvious way in which the largest sector in the country is consolidating into the hands of our investee companies. And the second aspect of consolidation in our country is the other side of the balance sheet, the saving side of the balance sheet, where historically households like yours and mine and our friends and family used to have this mad fetish for buying flats. Lower Parel mein kharido, Gurgaon mein, Noida mein, Sarjapur mein, Salt Lake mein, Rajarhat mein. That mad frenzy for buying flats thankfully has abated, and people are sensibly investing in the financial services sector through savings products. So depending on how much money they have, कुछ लोग mutual funds कर रहे हैं, others are coming to PMS, some are going to AIF. But in so doing, they're crunching the savings ecosystem away from tens of thousands of real estate builders into the hands of, say, I would say no more than 20 plays on savings in our country. Life insurers, general insurers, asset managers, wealth managers, no more than 20 of them are getting crunched up. So India itself, like America between 1880 to 1930, like Japan in the 50 years after the Second World War, like Korea in the 50 years after the Korean War ended, India itself is going through an epic consolidation. It'll last the rest of my career. And all we are doing at a very simple level, all we are doing in Marcellus is we are benefiting from the consolidation of India into the hands of a handful of companies who don't steal your and my money, who allocate capital rationally, sensibly, and who build dominant franchises using barriers to entry around technology. So a lot of the kings of capital are actually plays on technology more than on anything else. These are fintech companies, but the public doesn't see them as such. So Bajaj Finance or HDFC Life are more fintech than the explicitly fintech companies that you might hear about, right? So we are investing in companies who are using modern technology, using dimag, using hard work, using intellectual property to make it very difficult for others to compete with them. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think I'm going to find too many other investments as compelling as this. So I intend to carry on topping up my investments in this portfolio that Tej is managing. So back to you, Kamal, for however you want to moderate.
Sure. Thank you so much, Saurabh, for coming today and sharing your thoughts. And I absolutely, the reason we kept this webinar today because I also believe in the the perspective that you have shared. However, to take it ahead, I would want to kind of ask maybe a couple of questions which our clients ask us and which they have all the right to ask because they kind of are logical questions. And if you allow me, I will start with question number one.
Yeah, of course, Kamal. I mean, any civil society questions have to be allowed, right? Without questions, you can't get dialogue. Yeah. Without dialogue, you can't move ahead in life.
Right. So first of all, the entire genesis and the basis of investing in financial services sector is that India's economy will show growth, and obviously the financial services is the backbone of growing economy. And hence it will participate. And that is also, true with the understanding that last 10 years were actually not too much about India's economic growth. And in fact, GDP numbers are coming down. And that is where, maybe financial services overall sector actually did not deliver that well. But yes, some of the quality companies, not particularly in the financial services sector, but in the overall economy, but few quality businesses, they kind of participated. Now, the next 10 years are about growth to overall economy, and we are linking that with the overall economy ultimately, helping financial services sector, rather than just quality banks or quality NBFCs or quality non-financials, non-lending finance businesses. I'm talking particularly about say stocks like ICICI Bank, stocks like State Bank of India. Right, so these are those banks which ideally are more linked to capex story, and have already been delivering maybe higher return than Kotak Mahindra Bank, than HDFC Bank. And when clients and investors see that they are holding quality banks like HDFC and maybe AU Small Finance Bank or Aavas Financiers or Bajaj Finance, these stocks have actually not participated. And it is an opportunity that they have not participated.
हाँ जी, तो कमल, if I can stop you there, क्योंकि आप बहुत सारे सवाल एक साथ mix कर रहे हो, तो मैं let me unpack it and answer it one by one. नहीं तो the time that your clients are giving us will not be used fruitfully. तो पहला सवाल, your first question was, financial services a play on growth. So growth कहाँ पे है भैया? Growth तो नजर नहीं आ रही. GDP growth is sclerotic. So कैसा होगा financial services में फायदा? So 2 points to understand, folks. The companies that we are investing in don't just specifically benefit from GDP growth. There's 2 other dynamics that they benefit from. Firstly, market share shifting, right? I stress again, remember 60% of loan book market share is with thaka hua PSU banks. as the PSU banks run out of money, and they've already run out of money for all practical purposes, as the PSU banks run out of money, well-run private sector lenders, those that we have invested in, plus other private sector lenders, unko market share gain hoga. So as private sector lenders gain share, from PSU banks, even with weak GDP growth, even with weak credit growth, high quality private sector lenders will grow their loan books at 15-20%. ये कुछ नई बात नहीं बोल रहा मैं आपको, last 5-6 years से यही चल रहा है. PSU banks relentlessly leak market share, and the well-run private sector banks relentlessly pick it up. And as I mentioned to you, over the last 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, take any period you want, you can see quarter after quarter, HDFC Bank, Kotak Bank, ICICI Bank, Axis Bank, Bajaj Finance, barring ICICI Bank, the rest of them are in our portfolio, etc. These banks are relentlessly growing at 15-20%, even though GDP growth nominal terms में है 7-8% and credit growth nominal terms में है 7-8%, right? So step one, realize you don't need heavy GDP growth for private sector banks to consistently grow at 20% because of the death of the PSU banks. So इसका best example क्या है? The demise of Air India over the last 30 years, right? धीरे Air India मर गया, or it sort of exists but it's not really there. And as Air India died, the private sector airlines benefited from that. It's another story that in spite of Air India's market share being handed to them for free, the private sector airlines have by and large, not been able to make money. वो दूसरी कहानी है. Here the story therefore is similar. PSU banks का demise and gain for private sector lenders. Next question you're saying is, ये सब हो रहा है. All of this good stuff is happening. Kamal is saying, but भैया Kings of Capital में तो पैसा नहीं बन रहा है, कहीं और ICICI Bank और SBI बना रहा है. That's not quite true, Kamal, as Tej explained. Bajaj Finance, which is in the portfolio, has I think almost trebled in the last 14-15 months, and it's a big part of both this portfolio and Kings of Capital. The lending part of Kings of Capital has, as Tej explained, 60% lenders, 40% in lenders. The lending part of Kings of Capital has more than kept pace with the Nifty 50. Our house investment style is such, we are not going to invest in banks with low quality governance, with history of corrupt activities in the boardroom, with a history of poor governance, poor capital allocation. And we're not going to do it. If you guys want, those who are listening, you want to make money in the short run from poor quality lenders, feel free to burn your money, but we will take no part in that. Our goal has been, always will be, steady compounding for our 7,000 clients by investing in clean lenders. Clean is important in financial services. You want to go and invest in low quality lenders, feel free, folks. We're not going to join you because you will blow up your wealth. Investing in clean lenders is absolutely critical because lending is a highly leveraged activity, right? 10 रुपए के equity पे 100 रुपए का loan दिया जाता है. Every bank fundamentally around the world 10 रुपए के equity पे 100 rupees का lending करता है, 10 rupees equity. Therefore, even 1 rupee screw up in lending wipes off 1/10 of the bank's net worth. Even 1 rupee screw up out of the 100 rupees, even if 1 rupee goes bad, that's 1/10 of the net worth gone. 2 rupees goes bad, which actually happens to many good banks. 2 rupees to ja hi sakta hai. That's 1/5 of the net worth gone. And what we have seen in our country repeatedly, again and again and again, naughty lenders flatter to deceive. 2-3 साल चमकता है, numbers को मसाज किया जाता है, and bang, one day lender का 90% market cap evaporate हो जा रहा है. Again, diamonds in the dust पर ये get an introduction to how your money will be looted if you go and invest in low quality lenders. So the second theme you raised. Third theme. Again, why don't we need big GDP growth to make a lot of money? The answer lies in this chart. So what this chart shows you is 50 years of data, 1960 से लेके 2020. The world's 50 largest economies, 50 years of data, right? And how the ratio of retail credit to total credit grows as a country gets richer. So in the chart, the x-axis is the country's per capita income. So obviously, as you go right, the country gets richer and richer. And the y-axis, the vertical axis, is the ratio between retail credit to total credit, right? Retail credit or total credit ka ratio hai. So as countries get richer, the ratio of retail credit to total credit goes up very sharply, the red line, right? And this is, as I stress, 50 years of data across the world's 50 largest countries, right? So each blob is 1 year, one country, 50 साल, 50 country, मतलब 2500 data point में solid evidence solid evidence that as the country gets richer, retail credit becomes significantly more important. And exactly the same thing is happening in India. Why? Because India to bilkul is chart ke niche wale part mein hai, right? Where that arrow is pointing you towards. We've got a whole 20 years ahead of us as our country gets richer. Retail credit. This retail credit is lending for home loans, car loans, SME loans. That's called retail credit. Retail credit will become more important. And as Tej has already explained implicitly, the Kings of Capital fundamentally is a play on retail credit, whether you look at Kotak Bank, HDFC Bank, Aavas, Bajaj Finance, right? So 3 things to respond to Kamal's blended question with. Pehla, we don't need big GDP growth to make a lot of money here. PSU banks ka death will help. Tej, if you could pull out, I think you've done a newsletter on this. If you could pull that out, वो triple market share shift आपने दिखाया था, right? PSU to private, फिर retail में shift. So step 1, PSU to private shift will help us make money. Step 2, as lending in India increasingly becomes retail and less corporate, and you can see why lending will be less corporate in India. The tech companies that everybody raves about, उनको बैंक से debt नहीं चाहिए. The tech companies that are all IPOing, they don't need a rupee from the banks, right? Corporate growth, corporate capex, the hathoda pitawing capex of steel and petrochemicals and road, wo purane zamane ka hai. That's not going to be the biggest theme of the next 3-4 years. So there will be corporate capex, but the big theme for the next 20 years is retail credit, home loans, SME loans, car loans becoming more prominent. That's the data coming from the last 50 years from 50 other economies. So we play the jump in retail credit vis-a-vis overall credit. We play the shift from public to private. And thirdly, we are very clear in our heads, we will not punt on low quality lenders. Kamal rightly has said, and even Tej said it right at the beginning, several low quality lenders have had a good run since July last year. So if you take YOY, बहुत मजा आ रहा है low quality lenders में, लोग उछल रहे हैं. Take a 2-year view, अकल ठिकाने आ जाएंगे.
Right, Saurabh. I think, one point which I learned over the last 5 minutes is a very phenomenal point that you mentioned, that KCP is not focused on corporate lending, and why it is not focused on corporate lending, and why retail lending will continue to perform and maybe is a bigger opportunity than corporate lending over next 10 years. And that, I think, answers question.
Just to be clear, मैं कोई नई बात नहीं बोल रहा. Last 10 years में corporate lending कुछ खास मजा नहीं आया है, right? So barring that 2005 to 10 period where some banks in our country went berserk, doling out corporate loans, which obviously memorably blew up between 2010 and 2015. Barring those 5 years where some crazy people in India believed you could lend to corporates and make money, by and large, our country has been about retail lending. More importantly, what I'm trying to tell you guys is data for the last 50 years for 50 other countries shows that as a country gets richer, retail lending drives the show. And in India, we're going through that. Tej, have you been able to get that newsletter where we show the triple shift?
Yes.
So over to you, Tej, then.
Is this visible?
Yes.
Okay. So this is one chart which shows the credit growth for the banking sector as a whole. It also shows how it interacts with the credit growth of private banks and what the real GDP growth is like. So if you look at the blue line, you're right. I mean, banking credit growth, whether we take 5 years, 10 years, it's not really gone anywhere. And real GDP growth also over the past 10 years was pretty subdued. However, if you look at the blue line, which is, if you look at the yellow line, which is the banking sector which is the credit growth of private banks, then that's been pretty steady. Now, the reason behind that is it's not that banking sector was growing rapidly. It's not that real GDP growth was coming in very rapidly. It's simply because the PSU banks were giving up market share at a rapid pace. So while banking sector growth in some of the years was between 0 and 5%, even then private banks were able to grow in double digits. And that's been the story of the past decade. That will continue till the time that PSU banks exist. Over the past decade, we can see the gray line, how the market share gains have played out for the private sector banks. At the beginning of the decade, they were at only around 25 to 30%. Over the past decade, they've gained 10 to 15% market share, which is shown by the gray line. So even if GDP growth is okayish, even if banking sector credit growth is not very rapid, even then private banks can grow. Past year also we've seen banking sector credit growth was 5-6%. HDFC Bank, the largest private sector bank, it's a small bank. It grew at 15%, 10% higher than the banking sector credit growth. Last 10 years also, banking sector credit growth was 9-10%. HDFC Bank loan book growth was 21%. So that sort of differential will continue to remain.
Sure. Right, Tej. So, while you have covered last 10 years of data, this again maybe, takes me back to my, earlier question itself, that though last 10-year data that you have just shown shows the growth of retail lending versus corporate lending, but I think a decade before that could be, I am not 100% sure, could be more about corporate lending because it was an era of growth in economy and, sectors like infrastructure and capex oriented theme was performing. And if next 5, 7, 10 years are again about recovery.
So, Kamal, just to correct you there, I showed you data for 50 years, Kamal, not 10 years. मैंने आपको 50 साल का डेटा दिखाया 50 देशों के लिए. I'll project it again. Right, 50 साल का data for 50 countries, showing that the main trend, the most prominent trend in lending the world over, right? 50 साल का data, 50 countries. Let me beam it up again, right? क्योंकि काफी important चीज है. हमारे देश में लोग उछलते हैं corporate credit लेके. But the broader global picture suggests that focus on corporate lending is completely bonkers. So ये World Bank का data है. It's not as if I've made up the data overnight, right? One second. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, this chart. So this is World Bank का data. Each blob is one country, 1 year. So 50 country hai, right? So high income, middle income, low income, right? High income is rich countries like UK, USA. Low income is India. Lower middle income India aata hai. Upper middle income is places like Thailand, Sri Lanka, and low income is bulk of the African nations, right? So low income Africa, lower middle income hum, upper middle income the Southeast Asian nations, and high income the Western world. ठीक है? 50 साल का data, 50 देश. Clear chart on the right hand side saying as you get richer, private credit becomes more and more important. Private credit matlab retail credit. This is World Bank data. Usme private credit basically refers to retail credit. Retail credit becomes more important. Why? Because as a country gets richer, आपको steel plant or road or real estate or was hathoda pitoing, the old style of hathoda pitoing capex, which I call it, becomes less and less salient. What becomes more and more important is financing households के aspirations, right? घर, गाड़ी, लोगों का education, consumer durables, that becomes more and more important. Our country's history also shows that. India ka, by the way, why don't I show you India ka credit to private credit to total credit chart, right? Because it directly addresses Kamal ka point. So this is India ka chart, same database, right? This is India's chart. This is India's private credit to total credit 1998 से आज तक. 1998 में retail credit was 7% of our total credit. आज वो 22 हो गया है. What Kamal is referring to is ये वाला period 2005, 6, 7, 8 जहाँ पे people in our country went bonkers, building power plants which didn't generate a unit of power, building roads where more money was stolen than actually used to build the road, and all of us know, right, what that ended it. जो 2005 से 10 का craziness हुआ lending में, epic fraud, scams, a lot of people, unfortunately, the careers ended, a lot of banks blew up. 2010 से 15 के बीच में the bill for the stupidity came through. But barring that period of madness, barring this period of madness in corporate lending, our country's story really has been the global story, which is as you get richer, retail credit becomes more and more salient. And the previous chart I showed you that's telling us this line will keep going up like this for the rest of our lives, right? Ye wala period aberration tha. Clearly, a lot of very naughty stuff got done. We can have a whole seminar if you want, Kamal, on how money was looted from the banks in this period, जहाँ पे crazy corporate lending हुआ, much of which actually resulted in no productive asset. Right? Much of this lending resulted in no productive asset. It was just loot machine in full drive. Last 10 years, last 7-8 years especially, we are back to par. Right? Sensible story फिर से चल रही है. Right? And that's what Kings of Capital is trying to play. Yes, we have the banks we have invested in, Kotak Bank and HDFC Bank. They will do some corporate lending, but the main theme you and I need to focus on is retail lending. Corporate lending में nobody on this call is going to make a lot of money because spreads पूरा crunch कर देता है. When a Reliance Industries borrows, he absolutely squeezes the spread down. Bank को पूरा निचोड़ लेता है. When an NTPC borrows, they squeeze the banks. However, when Saurabh Mukherjee buys a house, he doesn't have that much bargaining power. He has, but utna bhi nahi. And when, say, Tej Shah buys a car at the showroom of, say, Maruti, his bargaining power is also modest, right? So do you really want to, do you guys on this call, do you really want to make money trying to bet on a banker making money from the mighty Reliance Industries or NTPC? I don't want to. बस जिंदगी में और तरीके हैं पैसे कमाने के. So folks, I need to head off for my next call. I'll leave you in the safe hands of Pramod and Tej. And Kamal, thank you for hosting us.
Right. So I think, I also, had kept time till 11. It has been really pleasure talking to you, Saurabh. And I think this particular aspect that we have discussed, about KCP focusing on retail lending versus corporate lending, and retail lending being the long-term, wealth creation segment in financial services itself, answers all and most questions that have come on the chat or, were there in my script or in my mind. And I think, this is a very, very phenomenal learning. And I think, this covers every aspect. Thank you, Pramod. Thank you, Saurabh. Thank you, Tej, for taking our time today. And I once again wish a very happy Independence Day to everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.